Yes, ma'am.
Order.
Councilmember Cope,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Ready, Burkhart.
Here.
Mayor, council, good evening. I believe that Sarah is going to run the clear up. But so this year, we have included in the budget that's before you, the addition of two additional firefighters and then an administrative assistant, so 3 additional personnel. So when you see it goes from 47 to 50, that is what's being presented tonight. The 2 firefighters are what the fire board recommended to move forward with budget process on. That would be 2 working in ancillary shifts, so it would still be full-time, 48-hour week. They would not be eligible for the Fair Labor Standards Act, extra additional overtime that the rest of the firefighters are because they're working 48 hours. They would have to work a cycle of 53 or more hours in a 27-day cycle to be eligible for that. So it saves a little bit money over personnel on a 56-hour week. And then administrative assistant was contemplated at the September fire board meeting and was authorized to be hired early, but just the general overall, it'll show up both. The number of personnel shows up in both the fire and the ambulance budgets. And so in order to ensure that we have enough reserves, even though the fire board said, yeah, go ahead and hire that person now. We still have not filled that position. We anticipate waiting until the last quarter of this year to fill that position. And that is so that there's some overlap between myself and Deputy Chief Shipper before the end of this budget year, so that they have an idea of all the jobs and all the duties that will be expected of them going forward into the next budget year. If we look at, if you want to go through the ambulance budget, I think that's what's listed first. Yes.
We go back to this. They have the chart there.
Yes.
So there's an administrative assistant, 100% general fund. Is that the new position?
That is the new position.
Okay. So previous to that, there was no administrative assistant.
No, there's never been, since I've been here, administrative assistant. And then the EMS assistant chief is actually a swap for Deputy Chief Shipper, the deputy chief, because we're anticipating his retirement along with mine somewhere around July. And so not budgeting for him for next year, but budgeting for that position that will pay a little bit less. So there is a little bit of savings in the budget for that. So, and then if you look at the 2 kind of circles where everything else is more of a square, those are those 2 ancillary shift firefighters. Janet did a nice job of noting down below that they are not attached to a shift, but we'll be working a daytime schedule Monday through Friday to pick up where the highest volume of the ambulance calls are. So those 2 plus the administrative assistant are the additions proposed for next year.
And just for as a reminder, designation 37, 38, 39 are
The 3 fire
right.
stations.
So 37 is
The
here.
Grime Station,
Grime Station.
39 is the one here on Merle Hay, and 38 is the one in the middle on 62nd Avenue.
So if you work west to east, 37, 38, 39.
Correct.
Okay.
So then moving, if we want to go into the ambulance budget first. Yes. And so if you're looking and you do not see the actual spreadsheet, the lines, there is a little button up at the top there where it says spreadsheet breakdown. You just have to click on that and then it'll bring the spreadsheet down. Otherwise, all you're gonna see is all the graphs. Does that make sense? Yeah. Probably some update that they did, but. Yeah. So it compressed all of those. So, the salary lines, the salaries, the benefits, all of those, are what Sarah inputted based on those three new positions and then reduction in salary between the deputy chief and, assistant chief position. We also are budgeting, a savings this next year, because we've got a dual-hatted person now doing the fire marshal role as well as the building official. So the general fund is being charged 30% of Adam Ostert's salary and benefits. So that's coming into our budget at 30%, versus the 100% of that position that was in there in the past. So there are some savings that we're realizing there as well. And then I went through, kind of line by line, looking at different areas that we could trim the budget, knowing that next year was going to be a tough year. So you'll see some lines went up, some lines went down. One of the increases, we went an additional $10,000 in the EMS training line. From $50,000 to $60,000, that extra $10,000 increase was to ensure we have enough money in that line to pay for 3 paramedics going to Mercy instead of DMAC. Nothing personal. It's just that DMAC has a night class and it required more overtime to allow us to send one person off of each shift to attend multiple nights per week for over a year. Mercy College of Health Sciences has a little bit more of a hybrid program where they still can do it while they're in the station, but they're not going to the campus, only for the hands-on portion for the lab work on Thursday nights. So if they have class on Monday and Tuesday night, they can do that in the station without having to backfill for those individuals. So that saves us money in overtime, but it's costing us a little bit more in tuition. But overall, the savings is much greater in the overtime. Then increase in maintenance of vehicles. We've had a lot of problems with our ambulances. And so I increased that from 38,000 to 45,000, which is about an 18% increase. And that's to ensure that we've got enough in that line to keep all of our ambulances running. Mark Caskey and Brian have been doing a great job prior to hiring that second mechanic, which has also got a portion charged to our budget. We were sending the ambulances out for repairs. And we had one ambulance sitting at Stivers Ford for about 6 months total in a year's time. We kept sending it over there. They'd say it's fixed. We'd bring it back, and sometimes they wouldn't even make it back to the station. Now that Mark has gone to Des Moines Fire and figured out with them some of our issues, he's been able to replace sensors and keep them running much better than they were before. But it's still expensive to maintain those, and we were going over budget in the past, and so I increased that line. And then our GMP state reimbursement, that's all based on the number of calls we have and the amount that we get back from the federal government for our Medicaid transports. And since our call volume is going up, I increased that by about 6% to make sure we had enough to pay the state for their portion of it. Then some of the larger reductions, Sarah was able to make some adjustments to our insurance lines. She figured that we've been over budgeting, or how it was allocated to, the fire budget was over in the general insurance, the workers' compensation, and the liability insurance. Or, I guess under in general insurance, but over quite a bit in, liability and workers' comp. So she's reduced those lines, workers' comp by 88%, liability insurance by 50%, and a increase from 66 to 82,000 for the general insurance. One other line that was not in previous budgets is the fiscal agent fee. Combined between the ambulance, which is $237,000, and the fire side of $63,000, we have $300,000 total that's being added to the budget to pay for finance, HR, payroll, all those functions that are necessary for the fire district. So part of that will be captured by the fees from Grimes going in to fund the entire budget. And so that's what they came up with for a number of what it would cost if we were to hire outside people to bring them in to do payroll and work on the budget and all the HR work, which is still probably kind of light, I guess, but it's a starting figure. And as we get a good assessment going forward on what all those ancillary duties are that go into running the fire district budget and the department, then we'll have a better idea if we need to adjust that going forward in future years. So that is one of the larger increases that we have. Then going through looking at other lines where we could reduce, miscellaneous services reduced by 20%. Legal fees reduced by 50%. Because this is not a contract year, I anticipated that we wouldn't have as many issues. I hope that comes to be true. We'll see. Radio maintenance reduced by 54% because we are not paying for the dispatch fees out of the fire district budget now. It's all being pushed over to the police department budget because Grimes gets their dispatching for free. It didn't make sense to try to take their portion that they were getting for free out of the fire district budget. That makes sense. And so we shifted those costs and moved it over to the police budget for dispatching for both police and fire out of Johnston to make it fair to Grimes as far as how the district budget works. Reduced telecommunications by 16%. We're cleaning up some phone lines out of station 38 that we found that we're not using. We're also trying to remove all of them and go to IP phone lines, but now we found that we can purchase a piece of radio equipment that will actually communicate back to the public safety server so that we don't have to pay for those ongoing monthly charges. Those charges got more than doubled this year and it was passed on to us. And so we were looking at ways we could reduce our costs. And so we have to buy a piece of equipment. It's about $1,500, but if we're paying $300 a month, it doesn't take too long before we're gonna recoup those costs. And then vehicle maintenance supplies and reduce that by 50% based on our past history. So that is the changes to the ambulance budget. Are there any questions?
Chief, I'm just looking at the revenues summary,
Yes.
and for FY 27, it shows a projected pretty significant drop. Reason for that?
Probably because I carried the number forward to 27 and didn't update it like I did 26.
It's not.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
City contributions.
Okay. I just didn't know, there's no policy change.
No. No. Yes, fire, if there's no more questions. And then again, on the fire side, very similar to the ambulance side, I looked at line by line to see if there's areas that we could reduce. I reduced the fire training budget by 13%. Most of that based on past history and forecasted trainings going forward. Again, you'll see that new fiscal agent fee for $63,000 on the fire side. And that's more or less based on the percentage of fire and ambulance. Ambulance, we load the budget up more on the personnel side because we use our call volume percentages, about 80-20, 79-21, to figure our wages and benefits. And so we kind of, and Sarah did that on the fiscal agent fee as well, putting more of it on the ambulance side than fire. Some of that helps when we do our GEMT reimbursement, which is that federal program where we get reimbursed for Medicaid calls that we transport. And so it is prudent to make sure we separate the fire and EMS by those call percentage. Again, reducing legal fees by 50%, reduce the dispatch fees on the fire side as well. And vehicle maintenance supplies, reduce that based on our past history by 16%. And then vehicle operation supplies reduced by 9% and office supplies by 23%. And then we had a slight increase in fire supplies of $5,000. And that's to help pay for some additional fire gear that we'll need for the 2 additional firefighters. It won't cover the whole amount, but again, not trying to be very budget conscious, not raise it by 10, hoping that we can find another 5 within the current budget to buy that gear, which is about $5,000 per individual. And then fire prevention supplies, we did increase it from $5,000 to $6,000, which is, you know, a 20% increase, but it's still only $1,000. The more and more events that we have scheduled that we send our staff to, we're handing out more and more of the helmets and the trinkets and that type of thing. And so it's not a large increase, but we have been going over budget in that line. So just wanted to try to reflect that that's more in line with the actual cost. So, and then the same type of savings on the insurance lines. Yes.
But Chief, how do you allocate salaries between ambulance and fire?
So-
Because these are the same people who are doing.
Right.
So how do you?
So we use the percentage breakdown of the calls. So with basically 79% of our calls being medical related and 21 fire. That saves us a lot when it comes to the workers' comp insurance. Because the workers' comp insurance rate is about 10 times as much for a firefighter as it is for an ambulance person. So we did that probably 5-6 years ago. I found out that other cities were able to do that with their work comp insurance, and Cindy had tried for a couple of years to get our insurance carrier to do that, and they kept saying, no, nobody else does that. And then finally they said, oh yeah, there are people that do that. And so we're able to save, I think at that time, we saved at least $300,000 by switching the percentage. And so that's why all the payroll is not split 50-50, but by the percentage of the call volume. And it saves us a lot there. Plus, it also helps when we split those costs because we track the cost specifically when we repair an ambulance and the ambulance fuel versus the fire engines, because all that goes into the formula for the uncompensated cost for those Medicaid calls that we transport. So that brings us in more money from the federal government to reimburse us for that gap between what Medicaid actually pays and what our uncompensated cost is. So, absolutely.
Chief, one quick question. On the revenue side, how do we determine the township contributions for those townships that we serve?
Sure. So those are by contract. So the townships in Polk County pay a higher rate than the township contributions in Dallas County. There is a clause in the Iowa code that says that here's the base amount, here's the max amount you can charge, and then there's another 20 cents per mil or per thousand mill rate that you get if you're in Polk County. The language says a county that has more than 300,000 population. And so we get the maximum amount we can get from our townships in Polk County. On the Grimes side in Dallas County, there's 2 townships that we have a contract for. We get the base amount from those townships. We don't have a lot of calls there. As Grimes keeps expanding and annexing, the amount in the township is actually smaller, because most of it's been 2 of the 4 townships that they have mostly been incorporated within the city limits. It's just the 2, Walnut and Grant, that are out far west of Grimes, that just don't have much of a population, so we don't get a lot of money from it on that side of the district.
And are those, those are not reflective of our budget, but they are reflected in the district budget.
They are reflected in the district budget.
So that revenue goes just straight to the district.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a pass through from Grimes to make the contributions to the district for revenues.
There's no fiscal agent fees that Grimes takes out of those.
No.
Thank you.
The only fiscal agent fees Grimes has been charging to the district is for administrative time to figure out the billing for the fuel, because they have their own fuel yard, and it's actually more efficient for us, for the people in the Grimes station, and sometimes the middle station to fuel in the Grimes fuel yard over there. There was no real efficient way to have all of that tracked and done by the district, and so there is some administrative time that goes into it on their side, and they just add that to, I mean, it's a small amount, goes on the invoice and gets sent over on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
Okay,
Unless there's other questions.
any other questions?
Thank you so much for coming for that. So I will let Sarah also control the ClearGov. I think it's probably the best spot to just came from, but just got some of the key statistics that I noticed when I was looking during FY fiscal 23 and 24 or 25, is that between those years, the door count increased from 110 to 12,000 statistics that we watched. Our programs and attendance grew almost 23%. In fiscal year 23, they had 643 programs, 14,000 individuals participating. In fiscal year 24, we had 778 programs with over 17,000. A lot of the current focuses in fiscal year 25 have been stabilizing and unifying staff, as they've brought me on as the new director. And then we've also had some additional staffing changes and reorganization so that we can identify roles and responsibilities and clearly state that, and people know you go to what's expected of them. We've had some great successes with our English language learning classes, as we again had some staff that left in September, new staff that was brought on in late October, and now the programs have picked up, are continuing to grow. I'm super happy about that. Our team space, it is so thrilling to watch those teams come in and play puzzles. It is amazing how many teams actually will do some puzzles. One of the comments that we've received recently is a parent who said their teams actually said this is their happy place. This is where they come to be. Another parent has said, their individual has trouble connecting with peers, and it's through what we've been able to provide at the library in that team space. That's not only helping them learn those social skills and creating friendships, but now they're exchanging phone numbers with people outside of the library. As we look ahead to 26, this is kind of where I focused our budget, is the full-time and part-time wages. Those lines have adjusted drastically because we have taken in the strategic or the organizational chart, there were the director and 4 managers. There's now director and 3 managers, and we took that difference and we hired another programming librarian focused on adult services, again, in response to that increase in our programming. And then, so there's gonna be some changes there. We also had 1 staff member that was making a little bit more leave, and so that'll bring in somebody at a lower pay rate. Part-time wages, that looks like a significant increase, but it's kind of offset by what was done with that full-time type thing, and it's actually accounting for what people have been scheduled, accounting for that 4% COLA increase that seems to be standardized over the last couple of years, and then just make those adjustments in pay. The repairs, maintenance, utilities, that's another significant increase that you're gonna see. It looks to me at, I took the budget, I looked at every single line at 5-year estimate, like averages, then I narrowed it down to a 3-year, and it looks like with the repairs and maintenances, at least the last 2 years, we've been spending about $60,000. So instead of budgeting 19,000, it's 60,000. Trying to make sure that in each of the different lines, I am putting what we're actually spending, the average of what we're actually spending in those lines, moving things around. So some lines look like they increase or areas, the repairs and maintenance, contractual services, the commodities, they may look higher or lower just as we move things around. Looking ahead, one of the significant budget increases that I'm requesting is to move to a Polaris hosted system. Polaris is our integrated library system. That's basically what looks for patrons, has lots of patron data safety. Right now, we are on an internal server at the library, if into a hosted, that would help protect some of that data security. Polaris is the ones in charge of the server. That would be an increase of about $6,000 over our annual fee right now. So that security also frees up some of our staff time. We don't have necessarily skill sets and server issues. The other significant increase you'll see in the budget is budgeting $12,000 for a architect to help assist through the building membrane replacement, which is part of the FY25 budget currently to get that membrane of the roof replaced. I am not skilled in doing roofs. I am skilled in doing libraries. And so this is asking for a budget of looking to that consultant to make sure that the roof is put on correctly, that it's identified as the correct type of roof and things like that. It's also asking for $44,000, so a total of $56,000 for the consulting services to kind of look at the building condition, space needs that identify city council's strategic plan. So that is a significant amount. I think it's needed, and it's part of the building condition to me and the roof, why they go together is I don't want to put a new roof on and then cause a problem for the air conditioning or some other issues. So I feel like it should be done in conjunction with each other. I think I've already talked about buildings and grounds, program services and supplies. I looked at that 3-year average. Combined birth through adult, I've increased it by about $8,000. Again, it looks like it's what we've been spending, but the budget numbers haven't been actually reflected as those numbers. And then ebooks and digital materials are also continuing to increase in circulation. As the demand is higher and they cost a little bit more than maybe a normal physical book would. So, are there questions that I can walk you through? No, I talked really fast and I summarized it and didn't go into any of it. Happy.
Other questions?
Also, my agenda, what's next?
In
Community development.
we move stuff around, some parks.
The parks is
Awesome. Just remember, this is my first budget, so take it easy on me.
Good luck.
I do remember I said something on Thursday, so. I'm gonna kind of do what Holly did too, is just highlight the big things. We made a few changes here, there, small dollar amounts, but big things we have going on in FY 26 is Crown Point will be coming online in April, hopefully, so a whole full 2026. But we are sort of unsure of what that's gonna look like with utilities, how much the solar panel is gonna help out, how much use it's gonna be. So we've done some estimating for it. We're hoping to bring in about $120,000 in revenue, which is estimating we're gonna rent it for 40 days on the weekends. So like 40 Saturdays or Sundays throughout the year. And then with that, the expenses have gone up just a little bit, basically because of refunds. People pay a deposit or pay a deposit up front. If they do what they need to do, they get that deposit back. So that kind of overlaps there. We're going to collect $40,000 from people up front. As long as they do what they're supposed to, they're going to get it back. So you're going to see a higher amount on both sides because of that for Crown Point. Otherwise, I think it is what it is. On the park side of things, you're going to see the dog park come online in FY 26, the Beaver Creek Water Access and Ridgedale Heights Park. So we've added $25,000 in miscellaneous revenues and budgets, buildings and grounds to kind of handle the maintenance of that, putting a porta pot out at Ridgedale Heights, things like that for the maintenance of those 3 new amenities. We also put in the budget to purchase a $40,000 forestry mower, which will help us mow the 156 acres, as well as some other areas and trails and stuff. It was gonna cost, we'll probably use that piece of equipment for at least a month out of the year. If we were to rent that from someone, it was gonna be $10,000 a month. So I think purchasing up front and then putting it in the CEP project is the best move for that. We've decreased some things in parks. We took some money out of the Emerald Ash Borer account because we've kind of treated most of those over the last 5 or 6 years that they either going to survive or they're not. We're also getting more revenue from the Johnston Town Center because of the contract that we have with them for the maintenance of the yard and snow removal and things like that. And then lastly, for recreation, we've added some money in the budget for recreation for not just senior programming, but also just other adult programming we'd like to do now that Crown Point is online. We've also increased our revenue for recreation as well because we are going to be charging fees for most of what everybody's doing. We're going to try and recoup 40 to 60% for senior programming for most of the fitness classes and game nights and things like that. The other recreation programming will break even depending on what type of programs those are. So that's my budget. I beat you by a couple minutes.
Jeff, I look at there's a line item here. Expense stuff. Yeah, 6,000 previously. So I'm looking at expenses, salaries, and wages. You've had historically been 5,000, 3,800, 6,000 for the budget that we're in this year. Kind of expecting to get to, so.
I don't think I may not have just carried over. I would have probably kept it the same as it was last year, not knowing everything. So I think that should be 6,000.
It was 0 last year.
6,000.
For this fiscal.
Oversight.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we started doing, we're getting called out for snow and things like that. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
It has not. Bolton and Mink Schneider Associates is finishing up the design of it. Hope to have bids out in March or April with construction happening this year and hopefully be done by the end of this year.
Assuming you're.
Yes, yep, so, yep. As well as Beaver Creek water access.
And one thing with the dog park is. Water conservation, they're pushing their project.
These capital projects, are they within your budget? They're not.
No. They're not.
Where do we carry them?
They're in the capital improvement section. We don't really put the individual line items in there.
Is the tree purchasing that we do every spring, is that carried in your budget?
Yes.
The dog park, are you anticipating or planning to do some public around? Like that, we're to kind of unveil a proposal and talk about that. We had an initial public meeting. They do a final one. We had a public meeting, plans got very grandiose. So, projects get passed, which is where it's at. So, it's certain schedule. I was kind of, forgotten about the last one. Yeah, so that was. It was right around the transition time of the park, so right before. And then project got slowed down because of waterworks.
So waterworks pretty much on schedule.
They're not on schedule. They've had some delays with materials, getting pipe delivered, those types of things. But they, depending on what the schedule is to get the project letting to start, they should be through that area by that time. We gave them spring to be through there by spring of 2025, I think. That March, May timeframe. So shouldn't really impact our start time.
They're aware of our plans. Keep reminding them.
Yes. Yes, we do.
There's a lot of stuff over there right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of-
Yeah.
And they've done some advanced boring, so I believe they're in anticipation to move through that area too. They continue to work through the winter.
Any other questions? Like what's next?
Next is.
So our budget, as you know, for community development is basically three pieces: economic development, planning and zoning, and then building and housing. So I will start with planning and zoning, and then Adam will talk a little bit about building, and Josh will follow up with economic development. So in the planning and zoning budget, I would consider it very much status quo from last year with a couple of exceptions. Now, each of the line items, legal fees, recording fees, we've adjusted a little bit up or down just to be consistent with what we've actually been spending in the last couple of years. So very nominal changes there. One of the things that I did change, we have a line item that is called plan and plat review fees. And we have that as both an expenditure and a revenue, and that is because that is where we are charged by our city engineer to review development projects that come through the office. We do not, of course, have an in-house city engineer. So we are billed for their review time. And then in turn, we bill an applicant for their actual time. So that is one way to think of it, is that is literally passed through. So we have the expenditure, then we have the matching revenue. But I did adjust that because we have the amount moving through that over the last few years has been less than we have budgeted. So I have pushed that number down a little bit. The main thing that has changed is that I have proposed under consulting fees, I have added $80,000. And that would be to undertake a Merle hay plan. And that is something that comes out of the current strategic plan. I believe in the strategic plan. It is called the Merle Hay Road Beautification Plan. But then if you look at some of the bullet points in there, it's really much more than that. So it's really looking kind of behind the curb. It's looking at the development, zoning, what's going on outside of our right of way and how should it relate to our right of way. So as you know, today we have a citywide streetscape master plan going on. And a lot of that as it relates to Merle Hay will be very relevant to any future study, certainly that we would do on Merle Hay. But a study that would look at land uses and typologies and how to best look at redevelopment along that corridor, I think is very timely, and I think it's very important. There are often questions as the city is processing and responding to requests that we receive in that corridor. And I think some of the other work that is happening could overlay nicely with a project there at this time. I would actually say that the number could probably be a bit less than $80,000, but just not knowing fully the scope of what it would be, that is what I have put in there. So that really in the planning and zoning portion of the community development is the significant change.
So we currently have this streetscape committee, first meeting tomorrow. And what I understand from that is to get, the consultant set up that site where you could go on and look at photos, say, I like this, or I don't like that. So we're looking at with this, hopefully with tomorrow's meeting, we haven't had yet, so we don't know how the consultant is gonna run it, but hopefully they're gonna take in ideas and sort of those of us on this committee talk about what we hope to achieve from this. And I guess what we're hoping to achieve from this is that maybe a consensus of vision and maybe an excellent, a carrying back and forth of potential. And so what you're proposing is the next step from that, would you say? As in, if you said zoning, so that's important, because if we're gonna talk about putting in XYZ landscape or nodes or zone or whatever, that's gonna involve beyond the easement.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. So the streetscape master plan, which is what you're referring to, is citywide, but certainly it will look at Merle Hay, right, as a main corridor. That's a fair statement. What I'm suggesting is that this plan would be specific to Merle Hay. It would absolutely consider what comes from the streetscape master plan as it relates to the right of way, that public way on Merle Hay, but it would look at beyond that. What should the development be along that corridor? How should we be treating pedestrian connectivity from, development parcels, existing uses back to the right of way? So I see it in the case of Merle Hay as kind of the second step. That's a fair statement, or the next step. So that's why I would say I would normally say in a corridor type plan, the streetscape would be part of it, but because we are already doing a citywide plan, then that fits nicely into what this proposed work would be, and that would not need to be repeated. So it's more about what kinds of uses, how should things look as we get inquiries about assembling or developing parcels along that corridor. What should that be? How should we consider that? So this that I have proposed goes beyond what should the right of way and immediate adjacent spaces look like. It's about the use, how would it be developed, and also how would it look, right? Those individual parcels, but it's more about what's happening beyond the curb. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
What would be your recommendation?
I would assume yes, or it would be very far along because that is underway now and funded in this current year.
That's what makes sense.
Yeah,
It would be well underway.
Yeah.
I think we'd probably be in our final stages as the beautification plan is getting kind of kicked off so that they could just really work on each other. I don't know if Josh talked a little bit, but I mean, even the public art component of some of that would tie into all of this. So there's really like three different pieces.
So when you're talking about zoning and really redevelopment, right? I mean, this is because it's pretty well
yeah,
developed.
Right.
There's obviously gaps, but.
Yep.
Do you have a plan like this? Do you have a model or example of somebody who's done a similar plan for another city like this? That maybe we could give us an idea. It's sort of, the hard part is it's kind of an abstract. I mean, it'd be great if you came across a plan
Yeah,
that
sure.
was kind of cover the same, that we could kind of look at and use, kind of get a better grip of really what should we be expecting in this process.
absolutely. And one thing, I can absolutely put together a list and some links to even be able to see some things online. What this type of plan in my mind is commonly referred to, just if you're out there looking, and again, I will provide some other examples. It's often referred to as a corridor plan, and those cases, it often does look at the public realm, meaning the right of way, because we wouldn't already have something like that going on. And it would look at redevelopment or underutilized properties and how and what might that development program look like. And the step further, what would it take to realize that, if that was the commitment and the vision? It may also have things, like we already have in some places of our zoning ordinance, right? The architectural standards and some of those things. It might look differently at those, but it would typically be more of an all encompassing corridor plan like that. Again, we are fortunate in that we have a lot of those pieces already happening. So to some degree, it would be bringing those together.
Well, but it's in your document, it's called the beautification plan, poster.
Yes.
And those sound like two kind of different things.
I don't disagree. It's called this in this budget because to make it be consistent with what is in the strategic plan documents. I would absolutely professionally call it a corridor plan. And honestly, even some of the bullet points and what's in the strategic plan, I would say it is more of a corridor
If you're
plan.
gonna get into this, that is.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I think the real question and the real sometimes challenges to solve is what should those uses be? What can be sustained there? What can be viable there? How much space and land does it take for certain things to be viable there? Because even though we may want XYZ somewhere, if there's not physically enough space or other factors that can support it, then we can want that all we like, but it may not be realized. So I think it's important to have that baseline on top of it.
Any other questions?
But, so the building department budget is, by and large unchanged. There are two notable, we did defer replacement of a city vehicle. We have, really good vehicles and we thought we'd get at least another year out of the ones we have before we have to consider. They're in great shape, low mileage, so we deferred that, but the more notable one would, be the permit software that we're looking for. The current software we have is not user friendly. It doesn't provide the connection to the community, the applicants, and the transparency that the new software is available. With the online portal that the majority of the new softwares provide, the applicant can fill out the application, see the status of it, pay for it online. All the permit or the documents, construction documents are available both for staff, Polk County assessors be able to access it, to download it. So every single process that we do would be streamlined by upgrading to a different software. The first year, all in would be $74,000 with an annual fee for the users of 28,800. That would include 12 users. Would be the cost of that. We anticipate the ongoing cost, the 28,800 covering that with our permit fees. So really the significant change would be the significant ask would be that first year. And I don't know if we were exploring the opportunity to kind of work with Public Works to bring those together. I'm not sure where Public Works is on that. I don't want to throw you out there, but
Nope, you're fine. We just actually had our meeting this afternoon. So if it's a discussion, seemed positive. So there could be some cost sharing. So we've looked at a couple of different pieces of software, but if this works for Public Works and the building department, there's no reason for us to go out and get a different software. So
I know it's we did solicit 3 different vendors. They provided kind of an overview of that. So the system. And this was what we determined to be the best for the value of the 3. So that was the major changes. I have to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Sarah, could you go to town center? Great. So we have a couple different budgets. This is the town center entertainment. Basically unchanged, with actually some savings while maintaining quality. Major changes or proposed changes are to actually increase our concerts by 1. So adding one of those 4 Saturday night concerts. But there are some savings to note to get there. The other notable changes are association dues have went down significantly from 148,000 down to about 119,000. So as more construction happens on the town center, our percentage decreases. So the hotel came online here a few months ago. So that is one of the notable savings they are now paying into and cost sharing some of those expenses. If you scroll down, Sarah, just to the breakdown. Got some notes here. The last 2 years, going back to FY24, this budget was at 305,000. We're now down to 269,000. We found just opportunity for savings. Things were padded a little bit. So for this year, for the entertainment specifically, we're down to $130,600. And then if you take a look at association costs and maintenance, it brings it up to 269. So we did find a couple of $1,000 savings this year. So we are proposing that 4th concert, which is what cost is $17,500. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's a 4th night of the Thursday night concerts, which is only $2,500 increase. And that increase for that proposed additional concert came from the community's request. Full support from the city has received notes from the community that they very much appreciate the concert series. It's great value, and with the additional savings, that is the request. Any questions on town center budget?
I'm gonna throw in the outlier real quick. You'll see this 310,000 that shows up in the budget. That was for this fiscal year CIP. That included the town center, the as well as the public art, the art. So that's why. That's what that is.
And that will probably be a future expense when that development comes up. Thank you. 520.
We want to community and economic development. And then economic development.
We've been very efficient. A lot of our line items have maintained to be the same. Couple of emerging and current issues for us. Some of them are tangential, but with the regional and local employer layoffs, that does put some pressure on economic development, oftentimes in a good way.
The increased availability of commercial office space in the region is an emerging issue for us. Our lower residential density does provide some challenges with attracting commercial development, specifically restaurants and experience-based businesses. Another challenge is the progress of some of the vertical construction we're all hoping for in our gateway district that we're all working towards moving forward. And then some of the aging commercial quarters like 86th Street, which we'll talk about, which we're gonna look at making an investment in. Like the redevelopment plan of Merle Hay and 86th Street. So two of the notable outliers for us in this proposed budget, like I said, most of the line items are very much the same, but a redevelopment plan or a corridor plan, as Tom called it, for 86th Street.
Rose called it that.
Okay.
You are.
Sorry, Rose, I didn't. $100,000 expense, that is an estimate. We're still refining the scope of work but based on staff discussions. We feel that's a safe estimate. Might be a little tight, but we would prefer to be reasonable with our resources. So 86th Street redevelopment plan, and then a city development guide, which is really an economic development piece. It's a marketing piece, which sounds a little bit soft, but is that one document that we have that we can hand out to prospects. The last time we did this development guide was in 2018. That cost the city $40,000 at that time. Talking with staff, we think we can update that document and get it done for $10,000 and move a lot of that work in-house. So we feel really good about that. When I originally proposed that, it was 40. Before it came to council, the committee, we got it down to 10. Sarah, could you scroll down? I don't think there's anything other to indicate. One thing is, and Sarah might articulate a little bit more clearly, but staff is fully paid out of HIP for salaries and benefits. I'm sorry, salaries. So the two staff that we have does not come from general fund.
Budget for it in the.
Yeah. Should give them more. Yeah. There's a revenue source. $1.5. And those ebb and flow as new development agreements come on and drop off. Those are just their time. Under our budget also is part of the hotel motel tax expense. So Jedco has graduated. So the $30,000 that we would normally invest in Jedco should be dropped off. Is that it there? Okay. So that's a decrease there. And then the airport investment, which we will start this fiscal year and continue forward into FY26, is $45,000. And then for the Johnston Chamber of Commerce, currently we're investing $15,000. I know as staff and council, we want to have some continued discussions about what the council wants to invest into the chamber. They did request 20. So under the hotel motel, there is some opportunity to consider that investment because Jedco is graduated. So other than that, the TIF expenses, as Sarah said, they're pretty straightforward, except those agreements that wrap up and then begin. Any questions on those? Right, so
on the airport, it shows that we paid $45,000 in payment and current. That accurate?
We budgeted for it. That will happen in June.
So we will make a payment
In June.
for this in the fiscal year.
Correct. That'll be our first payment.
That'll be the first 10 payment.
Correct. Yep. And council would have the option to make those payments quicker.
And I see kind of below those chamber and the Des Moines partnership, a consultant line item for $25,000.
The consultant, yes, that is an additional item that we have had. It's internally we call it special projects. Sometimes we have things come up that we don't have a budget for. And for example, when we created a new urban renewal area, in Fairway District along 86th, there's no TIF expenses for the cost of that. So that line item has stayed the same. It's a special projects line item. Oftentimes used for legal and consultants.
And I believe once that.
But in economic development, things come up. It's not just a loose fund, but a lot of times there's legal fees.
Yeah, we might want to just change the name of that to indicate that we are using a fair amount for legal. It's just, it doesn't, it's not particularly, you have 3 or 4 lines below, you have consultant or professional.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little, start different funds too, where the first 3 numbers are fine. Those 3 others. So this summary conglomerates a bunch of.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, I think it'd be helpful.
I can work with staff to see what.
Okay. Like, well, I consult the professional. And I get that that's probably tied to each district, right?
So you have 5 TIF districts, you have hotel, motel.
Yeah.
The O3O. That's all I have. Thank you.
I think it's here on chambers. Some of the actual communities, what they treat their local chambers, is a spectrum out there. Some provide no support. Grimes probably being an outlier at $227,000 a year. Caveat that there's they kind of break it up in 4 different buckets. I know they're working on a new contract, and it sounds like that new contract may just be 1 month versus they have today. But for chamber support within all, it's 23,000. We also do a leadership academy that they participate in as a city. That's about $8,000. Tourism promotions, $20,000. Community celebrations, $8,000. And then they do $156,000 for economic. What I heard from Grimes is it's 227,000. They are increasing next year by about $220,000. And over time, they expect with the economic development to probably be shrinking overall. But one of the notable things I would say is you look at probably some of our comparable cities. I look at like Waukee, they do 7.5 today. Some of their budget range, they're actually with 5. Urbandale 7,500. Keep that consistent. Norwalk's 21,000. We're looking to go down to 19,000. But there overall, there's not a consistency. It's about $30,000. And that's taking out Grimes. Because there's such an element there. So I think ultimately staff just needs direction. This status quo. That direction comes out of hotel, so it doesn't impact the rental.
Are they still having a conversation with us about some other costs that they want us to pick up?
They are, and I think that's gonna have to be a discussion. It's kind of discussing what's the right avenue to support green days. Keep the chamber to keep that community amenity going. Clearly support green days for a lot of staffing, take parks and police provide staffing, but we actually bill for some of that time, so you get reimbursed for something. But I think there's ultimately what's that levels. I think there's some other questions we probably should ask from partner cities there.
So the question is, should they've asked for an additional $5,000, $715,000.
And that's for their
annual contribution we give for kind of their ongoing.
Yeah, it's not a conversation. Not we, we're not, we funding for that.
At least at this point in time.
Are they expecting something
For the days
for this year?
for this current fiscal year 25. But for fiscal year 26, they would be, they're gonna desire that. But I think again, it's too premature for us to include it in the budget, so we really would. Budget.
I think semantics is really pretty wide into that situation. Membership has gone up, there's more activities, there's more working with other organizations, whether it's the city, the school. You know, I think she's doing a good job. We added the additional $5,000. It sounds like it was kind of in the middle of funding that by older chambers. So I would feel comfortable with $5,000 if requested right now. Thinking, but I think that we have to have some hard conversations on the additional funding support of that. But it sounds like they're not expecting that.
I just sort of wonder about, to me, so if you look at the historically, it looks like 3 years ago they were at 8, 2 years ago it was 10, it's 15. So we've done a pretty good pattern of increases. And I think that, I think we're gonna want to be in a position to address their green days ask when it comes. And so, because I don't think I think we're at real risk of losing if we don't. And I don't think. So to me, I'd rather keep it at 15,000 with the idea that an additional, any additional. As opposed to, so as opposed to going up to 20 and then sort of feeling like, well, we're a little bit strained.
And I hear what you're saying. You know, I see those as separate conversations. The support, the general support that they give, we would give them for all other activities, all these other engaged with. Again, I think that at $20,000, kind of in the middle of the package.
I'd like to see the version, because I heard all sorts of different, it sounded like mine was at 23,000. So I was kind of, I need to see those numbers, because as I was trying to digest, about 15 to me would seem like. So. I just, from my standpoint, I'd rather keep as much ability, as much as we like to sort of. So to me, I don't disagree that they're two separate conversations. But to me, then I think I'd rather have a little bit more money in the bank to address the green days conversation. And I think we do, we can at 15,000. And how much we give them from general. And I don't disagree that I think that they can, Samantha is really strong and all that type of stuff. But I think frankly, going 8, we doubled basically the money, right? Today, 2 years ago. So that I just would like to kind of hold as much in reserve to address the green day situation. I think we kind of need to do that. And so that would just be my thought process. And again, this is a topic that I even before we had this conversation, I hadn't really thought. And I can go both ways, but my initial gut reaction is more towards making sure we have more flexibility for resources to put on the table to help address the green days issue and make sure that green days, because I think that's where we're going to have issues down.
I think the expectation when we get to the conversation is much greater than $5,000.
I agree. Let's say it's going to be 20 to 20. Based on the numbers that they showed us in the, that was sort of, So that's all I'm saying is I'd rather have, let's say it's 20,000, hey, let's have 5,000 kind of in the bank to help address that as opposed to. If we increase them to 20,000 on the non-green day stuff, then that's $5,000 less we have to address it.
And we're obviously going to disagree on this, and that's.
I haven't made up, I've made it clear, I have not made up my mind, but I need more data. So I don't think it's fair to say we're gonna disagree, but I'm not blind. To me, I'd rather us keep as much flexibility. So that'd be my, just,
I think, I don't need to, I think Mike is asking for some direction. Maybe he's not gonna get the direction that he needs tonight. I think that the investment in the bank of $20,000 now is we're getting so much more value it's that than what we did even in 8,000, 10,000, and what those other value is.
I guess if Mike is looking for direction, he's looking for direction tonight. I wish we would have those numbers that he's working off of in our hands before the I can't provide you direction without having that.
And this is not the last, but
I'm sorry.
so this is not the last budget discussion.
So when you say they're clear,
Mayor, Councilman Cope, I was reminded that comes out of hotel motel. So I don't know if that eases, there's some flexibility in that account to consider that request. And so for this evening, I know we're considering all the budgets, but just that.
But isn't that what we would also fund whatever Green Days asset would have?
Likely.
It's one potential. And just for full disclosure, the chamber requested 35,000. So that's kind of their task. And I think they understood that that was part of the demands. And I think that's part of this. We need to have. Are we just going to give them $35,000, or is it going to be very specific uses within the days, or is it like there's a lot of discussion. And again, that's what I suggested. They get it in the 6 budgets. It's really going to be a budget. So, 6.
Could you direct me to where it is at Clearville? Thank you.
Is Green Days like a simple Bible? Should it be? Today we don't fund. I mean, obviously a lot of dollars we invest in staff. But there is not a specific fund. So yes, and if we decide to do that, we create.
I'm still not finding this doc.
Just budget change.
Have we ever, I know it's come up in our strategic planning and different things about the amount of community celebrations we have and their impact on staffing costs. Have we ever gone as far as to try to firm up what those indirect costs are?
So one of the strategic goals set was you all. I know Janet is kind of the leader of that. She's already put together a spreadsheet that she asked me. So I need to review that with her. But she broke down with the help of all the different events and then estimating the time that I don't think we got yet. One staff does sense what that staff. She's doing a really good job of getting that information.
My other question, and I realize it doesn't apply to this specific subject because of the funding stream. But if I remember on Thursday of last week, you kind of kicked us off by saying we had approximately $11,000 worth of wiggle room to still maintain our 25% reserves. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Thanks.
So this would be outside of that.
Obviously, we'll have some more budget discussion. We don't need to make a decision now. It's even. We have a couple of other things, a couple of other items. we need to do. So one of it is city council.
Or enterprise funds from our utility. This is really status quo. Current year rate is $755, there's no change in. The increase, changing revenues, AC is just our anticipated growth. We have no staff kind of coming out of stormwater utilities, so our expenditures are really paid that. We set aside 1% for the home care grant program, we set aside around 10% for this year for general operations and maintenance, water quality testing, the ability to do some deployment maintenance, the maintenance repairs, the projects that are. So really straightforward this year. No answer.
Does any part of our previous soil restoration project, did it come out of this budget?
There was some that came out of the current 25, finished that project up in 25, but there's nothing going forward. So
We don't have any soil restoration
We haven't-
projects.
we have,
We have a few to finish.
yeah, let me separate those. So we have our homeowner grant program. So if you want to do soil pipe restoration, could apply for a grant. What we did in 24, 25 was the larger, the citywide batch and build where we went out, hired a contractor, operators that wanted to do it, paid us their share. And then we had a grant fund, and some of our funds, some of Old County's funds to offset that. So we bought out the cost of that program. We're not proposing to do that again. That was a significant bit of the funding source through IDO. They basically said, well, that's kind of a one and done. On a basis. We do have stormwater projects. We're wrapping Green Meadows west of the Huntington chain. It's pretty much done. Obviously, in the spring. We're working on what will be next fall, the project up the country road. The big effort that's in our current year is update our watershed. That's funded. There's that's about to fund. So that will really help us dictate CIP. So
Any other questions about stormwater? So one area we did not get to at last budget workshop was city council mayor budget. Overall is status quo budget with the exception of mayor and council compensation. So if you recall, we had a workshop on December 2nd. And current compensation is $3,600, it's unchanged since 1988. Council compensation is $1,200 annually, that changed since 2001. We do have a detailed history of all the adjustments historically here at the Johnston City Board of Mayor and Council compensation. We did look at one of the things that we discussed at the workshop was looking at smaller university larger to Johnston and look at their compensation. And through that discussion, kind of in line with that direction was to set a budget compensation of $10,000 for the mayor, $5,000 for the city council. So that had been built into the budget. Now the increase itself does not take effect until after the next general election. So it starts January 1st of 2026. So there's only half the budget for the new compensation. So for example, in 2025, the total compensation is 9,600. For 2026, that would increase to 22,300. And then by 2027, we fully in that fiscal year at 35,000. In approving any wages in the budget for the first step, that's one of the steps. We'd still need to wage. This would just put it in the budget. So other than that, it's really the rest of the budget is status quo. For the mayor and council's budget.
Questions for Mike on that?
Mike is a Boston.
Say that again.
Is that
This is just one of the steps. The next step would be, and really the final step would be to consider a ordinance. So
Any other questions for Mike on that?
I guess just as a wrap up before we go to our next council, that really does kind of include the major department budget sections. If there's anything specific now that you guys want to follow up on, certainly bring that up, or if there's some follow up you would like to have, we'll have future council discussions in February, workshop, second meeting of the February, this first one we're doing the review. But we may have to. But anyhow, there'll be more opportunities in February to have discussions. Ask state questions. Let staff know so that we can prepare for that. Have a discussion that we're going to finalize the budget. But overall, I would say from a staff perspective, you know, this budget does leave it flat. So I think I'll pause there.
So Mike, we have a budget meeting scheduled for Thursday that don't meet now.
Unless the council wants to meet, if we've been through everything, so our plan would be not to have that meeting. That was it.
Does anybody want?
No.
Hearing none.
I'll send out a cancellation for next week.
The last comment I would make is it's a testament to your staff. Each and every one of your front direct experience for the good of the city. Making this fight for the public service. This budget is one part of the work we wouldn't be in the position. Without this budget, without simply saying.
Why is the merger of the department managers? And, you know, budget meetings.
Well, and I think that's a very good statement. This year, I think a little bit easier.
Charlie?